The 1994 Imola tragedy, the San Marino Grand Prix in 1994, wasn't just a race weekend. It was a bloodbath that exposed how far Formula One had drifted from safety, from responsibility, from sanity. On Friday, Roland Ratzenberger hit the wall head-on at over 190 miles per hour. The front wing of his underfunded Simtek Ford failed mid-lap, something that could have been spotted if someone had cared. But no red flag was waved, no statement made. He was declared dead shortly after. The paddock mourned for a minute, then everyone moved on like nothing happened. But Saturday set the tone for what was coming. Rubens Barrichello's horrifying crash in practice should have halted the weekend. Senna visited him in the hospital and came back shaken. That night, he told his girlfriend, "I don't want to race tomorrow." Those were his last words off track. Sunday, lap 7. The world watched in horror as Ayrton Senna, the face of Formula One, the soul of the sport, slammed into the Tamburello wall. A suspension arm pierced his helmet. The footage is haunting. He didn't die instantly, but he was never going to make it. The FIA erased the telemetry. The officials blamed a steering column failure, even though later investigations proved otherwise. They just needed someone to blame who couldn't defend himself anymore. Senna's funeral in Brazil was a national event. 3 days of mourning, millions in the streets. But back in Europe, the focus wasn't on healing, it was on protecting the sport's image. It took two bodies, not just heroes, but human beings, for the FIA to finally implement real safety standards. It was too late. Spygate, 2007. This wasn't some minor misunderstanding. This was theft straight up. Industrial espionage in broad daylight. Ferrari's top mechanic Nigel Stepney, angry over internal politics, leaked 780 pages of confidential designs and race strategies to McLaren's Mike Coughlin. We're not talking about notes on paper napkins. This was the entire car philosophy, suspension blueprints, tire strategies, the soul of Ferrari's operations. Coughlin's wife photocopied the pages at a local shop. The guy behind the counter saw the Ferrari watermark and called the FIA. When the scandal hit the paddock, McLaren denied everything, but the emails between engineers told a different story. Conversations referencing Ferrari's tire pressures, brake balance, even future upgrades. Alonso, in a bizarre twist, tried to blackmail McLaren leadership with more leaked information, unless they made him the #1 driver over Hamilton. The FIA didn't hold back. A $100 million fine, the largest in sports history, and McLaren was thrown out of the constructors' standings. Their 2007 season was erased from the books. The team never truly recovered from the internal fracture, and Alonso's image, once clean, was permanently stained. This wasn't just a rule breach, it was betrayal, greed, and arrogance rolled into one, and it nearly destroyed one of F1's most iconic teams. Crashgate, 2008. The Singapore Grand Prix in 2008 was supposed to be history-making, the first night race in F1. What it became instead was a masterclass in deceit. Renault needed a win. Alonso was too far back to earn one on merit, so team boss Flavio Briatore and engineer Pat Simons came up with something straight from a mob script. Ask Nelson Piquet Jr. to crash intentionally on lap 14, exactly where a safety car would ruin everyone else's strategy, except Alonso's. It worked. Alonso won. The world cheered. But behind the curtains, total chaos. Piquet kept quiet at first, but once Renault dropped him from the team the following season, he blew the whistle. Documents, emails, and even telemetry proved the crash was choreographed. The fallout was ugly. Briatore was banned for life. Simons got 5 years. Alonso walked away untouched and claimed he didn't know a thing. Really? Renault avoided full punishment by threatening to pull out of the sport entirely. No points stripped, no wins revoked. This was race fixing, the kind that, in any other sport, would have triggered a collapse of the entire league. In Formula One, it was Tuesday, the Ferrari FIA deal. In 2019, Ferrari's straight-line speed was terrifying. Red Bull and Mercedes engineers were raising eyebrows, then raising official complaints. The suspicion? Ferrari was bypassing the FIA's fuel flow meter, manipulating fuel delivery to gain illegal horsepower. It was borderline genius, and potentially illegal. The FIA launched an investigation, but when the verdict came, silence. No bans, no disqualifications, no public explanation, just a secret settlement with Ferrari. The rest of the grid was furious. McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes all demanded transparency. What they got was a confidential agreement. The FIA refused to release findings. The integrity of the entire championship was questioned. How could the regulator cut a deal with a team it's supposed to police? That season's results stood. Ferrari lost pace in 2020. Suspiciously so, but the scandal was never resolved. It just faded, buried under politics and PR statements. What the world saw was clear. If you're Ferrari, the rules don't apply the same way. The FOCA-FISA war before F1 became the billion-dollar brand we know today, it nearly died from the inside. In the early 1980s, FISA, the sport's governing body, was in a power struggle with FOCA, a collective of team owners led by none other than Bernie Ecclestone. It was a battle over everything: money, regulations, control. Teams boycotted races. Drivers pretended to be injured. At one point, only 14 cars started the 1982 San Marino Grand Prix. The fans were confused. Sponsors were furious. The media labeled F1 a joke. Ecclestone won the war, but at a cost. He centralized power, commercialized the calendar, and rewrote the structure of the sport. FOCA got the money, FISA got the regulations. But the soul of Formula One? That was the collateral damage. What started as a governance debate nearly split the sport into two rival leagues. If it had gone a step further, we wouldn't be watching Formula One today. We'd be watching the ruins of what once was. Jules Bianchi's Death Suzuka, 2014. Typhoon Fanfone was lashing the track, but the race went on. Visibility was near zero. The cars were aquaplaning. Adrian Sutil crashed on lap 42. Marshals rushed out with a tractor crane to remove his cart, but the safety car wasn't deployed. Jules Bianchi, driving at over 200 km/h in torrential rain, lost control in the exact same spot. His Marussia slid off and slammed into the crane. The impact? Gram. His head took the hit. The medical report later said his brain was forced forward so violently, survival was almost impossible. But this wasn't just a tragic crash. The FIA let the race continue in deadly conditions. The safety protocols had been ignored. It took 9 months for Bianchi to die in a coma. 9 months of silence from the sport. No one took responsibility. Only after his death was the virtual safety car introduced. Too late. Too quiet. Because Bianchi's death wasn't from speed. It was from negligence. The 2005 USA Grand Prix Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Over 100,000 fans in the stands, but on race day, just 6 cars started the Grand Prix. Michelin, the tire supplier for most teams, found their tires unsafe for turn 13. They requested a chicane to slow the corner. A simple fix. But FIA said no. Bernie Ecclestone said no. Ferrari said no. So 14 cars pulled into the pits before the race even began. The fans left betrayed, booing, throwing bottles. The US media tore into Formula One, calling it a fraud and a disgrace to motorsport. It should have been F1's American breakthrough. Instead, it was a humiliation so severe, the sport couldn't recover in the US for nearly a decade. And the worst part? It could have been avoided with a few cones and a conversation. Bernie's bribery scandal. Bernie built modern F1, but behind the empire was rot. In 2006, he sold F1's commercial rights to CVC Capital for $2 billion. But a banker named Gerhard Grikowski was paid $44 million in secret by Bernie. Why? Because Bernie wanted the sport sold to someone he could control. German prosecutors charged him with bribery and corruption. If found guilty, he faced 10 years in prison. In court, Bernie said the payment was blackmail. Then he changed his story again and again. Eventually, he paid $100 million to make the charges go away, not as a fine, as a settlement. No jail, no lifetime ban. And that's how the man who made F1 global also nearly sold it off like a backroom deal in a casino. Bar Honda's scandal. Bar Honda had speed in 2005, and suddenly suspicion. At the San Marino Grand Prix, officials discovered an illegal second fuel tank hidden inside the chassis. The design let the car run underweight during the race, then refill before post-race checks. It wasn't just clever, it was dangerous. The FIA called it a deliberate and sophisticated fraud. Bar denied it, of course, but the team was banned for 2 races and the scandal haunted Honda's reputation for years. If the crash had happened during one of those underweight runs, and a driver died, F1 would have been torn apart. Instead, the sport swept it under the rug again. The Bahrain nightmare. In 2011, Bahrain was on fire. The Arab Spring had reached its gates. Protesters were shot in the streets. Hospitals were raided. Doctors were arrested for treating injured demonstrators. Formula One still tried to race. Teams pushed back. Drivers stayed silent. FIA pretended politics had no place in racing. But the reality? The Grand Prix was being used as a tool to sanitize the image of a brutal regime. F1 eventually canceled the race that year, but it returned in 2012. And it's still there today. Every year since, human rights groups protest, but nothing changes. Because in the eyes of Formula One, if the money clears, the morals don't matter. Ferrari's FlexiFloor 2022. Ferrari's resurgence had the paddock buzzing. They were fast, consistent, and winning. But mid-season, questions exploded across team radios and engineer briefings. How is Ferrari keeping tire degradation this low? Why are they stable in every corner but no one else is? Then came the whispers. Flexi floors. Ferrari, Kia, and to a lesser degree, Red Bull, were using floors that flexed under load, allowing better ground effect while still passing static FIA tests. It wasn't explicitly illegal, but it was clear manipulation. Mid-season, FIA quietly changed the rules. New tests, new stiffness thresholds. Ferrari's pace, gone overnight. They were never penalized. No race disqualifications, no No points stripped, just tweaking regulations. Business as usual. But here's the problem. When the governing body waits until someone wins, then rewrites the rulebook quietly, is it even racing anymore? Or is it theater, with the script edited mid-season? Piastri's contract wore August 2022. Alpine announced Oscar Piastri as their 2023 driver. A future star, locked in, press release ready. Tweets live. Except, Oscar tweeted back, "I will not be driving for Alpine next year." What followed was one of the most humiliating moments in F1 contract history. Turns out, Alpine never signed him. Piastri had already secretly inked a deal with McLaren. A public war broke out. Both teams went to the contract recognition board. The ruling: Oscar never belonged to Alpine. They just assumed he would. It exposed how casual some teams still were with contracts in a billion-dollar sport. The fallout? Alpine lost their best young driver. McLaren won the battle, but chaos reigned. This wasn't just a driver swap. It was a public slap in the face to professionalism, and it nearly triggered a legal war in the paddock. Tobacco money ghost. Everyone thought tobacco left Formula One decades ago. They didn't. Brands like Mission Winnow, Ferrari, and A Better Tomorrow, McLaren, were never really product sponsors. They were fronts. Clean branding for big tobacco giants like Philip Morris and British American Tobacco. No cigarette logos, no smoke ads. Just slogans so vague they passed regulations, but still gave the companies access to global broadcast reach. Health advocates called it legalized deception. Governments filed complaints. But nothing stuck, because the branding wasn't illegal, just immoral. Formula One, which markets itself as a clean, sustainable sport, was still taking money from the same industries that nearly killed its drivers a generation ago. The Abu Dhabi finale lap, 53, Abu Dhabi, the championship on the line. Latifi crashes, safety car comes out, Lewis Hamilton leads. Verstappen's too far back. Then, race director Michael Masi makes a call that rewrites history. Not all lapped cars unlap, just the ones between Lewis and Max. One lap, one shot. Max on fresh tires. Lewis a sitting duck. Max wins. The world erupted. Mercedes filed 2 protests. Social media collapsed into war. Fans screamed, "Fix!" FIA said, "Human error." Masi was fired, but the title stood. To this day, 2021 remains the most divisive season end in sports history. Even die-hard Verstappen fans admit it didn't feel right, and the message was loud and clear. In Formula One, one man with a radio can decide everything. Budget cap scandal, 2022. Red Bull dominated. Max was unstoppable. But as champagne flowed, the rumors began. Red Bull breached the 2021 budget cap, not by millions, by just over $2 million. Not enough to trigger disqualification, but enough to raise hell. The FIA confirmed it. Red Bull had overspent. Their explanation? Catering costs. The punishment? A $7 million fine and reduced wind tunnel time. After they'd already won everything. Mercedes and Ferrari protested. Fans fumed. And for the first time, the championship itself felt for sale. The idea of F1 having a financial limit was supposed to bring fairness. Instead, it revealed how blurred the lines really were. Because in the end, they won the title. They kept it. They spent more. And the world watched knowing, in Formula One, even the rules have a price.